Hey everybody, just thought I would give you a little update on a project I've been working on for a few weeks. This is a vintage 72-inch Great Plains Cap 21 that a friend of mine bought for me at a swap meet last year, I guess. And it's just been sitting because I didn't really have the time or the motivation to work on it, but now that I'm retired, I do. So I drug it down off the wall and started looking at it. It was covered in black and red monocoat, and it was pretty rough. It had been sitting for a long time. It had servos in it and everything. So I thought, well, I'll just quickly do a recover and probably convert it to electric and fly it, because I always wanted one of these when I was younger and never got one. And I thought, why not? So as projects usually go, the more I uncovered it, the more things I found that needed to be fixed or improved or addressed. And it has turned into a complete resto-mod project. So I'll just kind of hit the highlights of what I've done, and then there'll probably be a couple more videos as it comes back together, and hopefully some flying videos soon. So as I said, it was a Great Plains Cap 21 72-inch, built back in the old days when everything was built like a tank. So the first thing I noticed was it was extremely tail heavy. And my idea of converting it to electric was quickly dismissed, because when I started looking at it, it was apparently set up for an OS 91 4-stroke, and I happen to have an old Magnum 91 4-stroke that I'm in the process of putting new bearings in, and it runs, but it's a little rough, and it drops right in. So I thought, oh, well, hey, that makes it easy. I can just keep that engine. So that's the engine that's going in it. But even with that mounted up there and everything in it, it was wicked tail heavy. So I started removing weight from behind the CG. As you can see on the fuselage here, let me set my coffee down. It was 3/16 balsa, the whole aft fuselage solid. So I pulled all that off, put in, it had these stringers in it, or these sticks that act kind of like formers. So I just cleaned that up and cut a bunch of holes. Cut a bunch of holes in the elevator and rudder, and just the holes in the elevator and rudder knocked 1.5 ounces out of the back, the very aft of the airplane, which is helpful. All of these holes knocked another couple of ounces, so I think I'm about 4 ounces down from where it was before, and that includes taking a hole saw to these solid balsa ailerons, which were chunky. So that has helped. The other thing I did is it had originally been built and covered and then assembled, so there were no real fairings or blending of the tail surfaces into the fuselage. So as you can see, I've still got some sanding to do, but that's going to be a lot smoother. And obviously the rudder and elevator are already hinged and on there. I kept the internal elevator push rod, but the old wire one was super soft, and you could just grab the elevators and bend them out of alignment because the steel wire was so soft. So I've made a new one out of carbon tube and a carbon horn that is JB welded on there. And I went with push-pull tubes. It had an arrow shaft push rod that was also extremely heavy after the CG. So we've got these well-supported Dubro push rods, laser rods, I think they call them. And there's a new servo tray that I laser cut, going to mini servos from full size, because today's mini servos have more torque than yesterday's full size. So these are some OMP Hobby mini servos that I lifted out of a crashed OMP Edge that I had. And actually the throttle servo is going to be a different brand mini servo. That one's just in there for fitment. Switch is going to be internal. It was, of course, the old school way, sticking out the side, but it's going to be internal with a little push rod to operate it. Did some changing the canopy. I don't actually think this is the right canopy for the kit. The shape right here is wrong. And because it's not, I don't think, the right one, it didn't fit very well at all. But I made it fit better, and I built up this little section here on the front that once it's all together and the frame repainted black, it should look all right. The color scheme is going to be similar to the original that you always saw in the ads for the kit, which was white with red and blue on the wingtips. but I'll probably use fluorescent red because you can see it over there. I love my fluorescent red. As you can tell from my helicopters, fluorescent red, fluorescent orange. I like to be able to see the things I'm flying. Let's see what else. The wings, I don't know if the servos were supposed to be mounted out here originally. That's where they were when I got it, mounted with these lovely blocks, and they were full size, and they actually stuck. They were thicker than the wing, so there's a bump in the covering. So I laser cut these little panels, and mini servos are going to be mounted here, and then of course that will just drop in there, and just the servo arm will stick out. So that's a much neater solution than what it had. Landing gear legs, they were just left in the original state where they were sheared from aluminum. So I took a file to the edges and Scotch-Brited them, smoothed them up. These will be painted with white appliance epoxy. What else? Oh, the cowling. The cowling was square. I mean, you can see it's got triangle stock in the corners, intended to be rounded as it is now. It was, imagine these lines just carrying straight out with a little bit of rounding on the corner. That's how it was. And these cheeks, they were meant to be trimmed down to the height you see here, but they had left them sticking all the way as they were molded. They were almost twice that tall, so it just looked bizarre. So lots of carving, still got some body work to do. Had to fill a couple of spots, and I had to cut that one little hole to relieve for the cylinder head. I mean, that's one advantage of them leaving it square and giant like they did, is the cylinder was completely in the airplane, but it didn't look right. But looks right now. That is the way a Cap 21 cowling should look. It's got the correct lines, and it's starting to look pretty good. It's still, it looks like there's a long way to go, but actually it's pretty close. I still have to hinge one aileron. I've got the hinges cut for one. Got to cut the hinges for the other, and start covering, do the pre-covering, because what I do is like I cover the leading edge and the trailing edge, and then hinge it, and then cover the rest. And actually on these I covered the entire surface, but I got to get the covering in here, and then the rest can be covered. So I'll do the same thing on the ailerons. I'll cover the ailerons themselves and cover the trailing edge of the wing, get it on there, and get it done. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to redo the fiberglass on the center section, because I don't know if he just used bad epoxy or if he used CA or what, but it just peeled right off. So gotta redo that glass. But it's getting there. When I mix up epoxy to do that, I'll fuel-proof the tank compartment. That was not done. I've already fuel-proofed the inside of the cowling, which I don't think, it was not done very well if it was. But my goal, the original weight of this was supposed to be between 7.5 and 8.5 pounds, according to an old ad I found for it. And my goal is to come in at the bottom end of that. So I'm hoping 7 pounds. And if I can do that, it should be a little more pleasant to fly. The original had kind of a reputation for being a very snap-happy airplane, the Snap 21 as they called them. But we're gonna see if we can avoid that reputation. If I can do it, these wings are pretty stiff, but if possible, I will twist in a little bit of washout when I cover the wing, and that will help as well. So that's about it. We'll have more updates on this as it gets closer to being finished, hopefully some flying video of it. But that's what's going on in the workshop.